Hi, everybody. I'm Soledad O'Brien. I welcome you all to Hispanic Heritage, Ayer y El Mañana, yesterday and tomorrow. You might know me from my work in journalism and television, but one thing you might not know is my connection to this wonderful month-long celebration of the Latino community. My mom, who passed away a few years back, immigrated from Cuba as a teenager, eager to get an education in this country, and also hoping for a country that would guarantee her more freedoms. In 1968, California Congressman George E. Brown pushed to recognize the contributions of the Latino community, and Congress passed Public Law 90-48, officially authorizing and requesting the president to issue annual proclamations declaring September 15th and 16th to mark the beginning of what was then called National Hispanic Heritage Week. Today, we're celebrating that special period of the year when the U.S. recognizes a community that is hardly a minority anymore. We are 60.6 million strong, a record 18.5% of the total population, and growing quickly. Our music, our art, our language, our food have all had a profound influence on American culture. We've even been heard in the voting booth. Our program today will focus on the creation of the Latino Museum, another congressional recognition of the accomplishments of our community. We will also have a conversation about what the future could hold for two leading agencies, the Smithsonian Institution, which is now leading the planning and the development of the museum, and NASA, the global leader in space exploration, science, and research. It is a measure of how far the Latino community has come since that day when Congress initiated the celebration that two such august institutions are at the forefront of our discussion. Joining me is Dr. Ellen Stofan, the Undersecretary for Science and Research at the Smithsonian. She oversees its science research centers, as well as the National Museum of Natural History and the National Zoo. Her focus is the Smithsonian's collective scientific initiatives, especially biodiversity, global health, climate change, species conservation, astrophysics, and the search for life outside the Earth's solar system. Before joining the Smithsonian, Dr. Stofan had 25 years experience in space-related organizations and a deep research background in planetary geology. It's so nice to see you, Dr. Stofan. Thanks for talking with me.
Oh, thank you for having me here today.
Of course, my pleasure. Let's first and foremost talk about the National Museum of the American Latino. That legislation to create that museum was passed just this last December. Can you give us an update on where this stands and what are some of the milestones that have been set for making progress along the path to getting it actually created?
We are so excited about the creation of this new museum, along with the American Women's History Museum. To have the challenge of doing two new museums at the same time is obviously a big challenge, but this is so, as we're going to be talking about today, this is just so incredibly important. And the exciting news is we've actually made a fair amount of progress. We have a search firm on board. We're searching for the director. Eduardo Diaz, who is head of our Smithsonian Latino Center, is the acting director while we search for a permanent director. We've appointed a 19-member board and will continue to appoint members to that advisory board for the museum to help them think about what is this museum? What is it going to do? How is it going to tell this amazing and complex story of the Latino experience in this country? So we are incredibly excited between the board, the search for the director, and of course there's that very small issue, where are we actually going to put this museum? And so we have a site selection process that's going on for both of the new museums. That process is obviously a complicated one. You have to really say, where on the National Mall or near the National Mall do we have the space to put two new museums? And so it's really that site selection that is the first really important step, way before you ever get to the actual design of the museum. And so again, those things are all underway, really exciting.
So you think that Latinos could have a place, a presence on the National Mall one day soon-ish?
Yes, definitely. And, obviously, as our Secretary Lonnie Bunch knows, going from having the congressional legislation to actually getting the museum built on the mall can be a long process. But we're really hoping that this process moves along. And that's why we've taken these steps of actually getting all the leadership in place, because frankly, that is part of the critical step. For those people who don't know, the Smithsonian is actually part federally funded and part privately funded. So about 60% of our funding comes from the federal government, and the federal government usually pays for the construction of museums. But everything that goes inside the museum, all the galleries, bringing in the artifacts, designing the museum, that is actually paid for from private funds that we get through fundraising. And so frankly, that's going to be for both of these new museums, that's going to be a big role of the board, is saying, how do we put together a fundraising campaign to help raise funds for these museums while we go through the federal process? Again, first of all, we have to have this site selection, we'll have to design the museums, and then go through the process of building it. So while it's certainly not going to happen in the next year or two, it is going to happen, and we're really excited about it. And I will say, to give us a preview of how exciting this is going to be, in May of 2022, the Molina Family Gallery will open at the National Museum of American History on the Mall. And that will actually be the first Latino-focused gallery on the National Mall at the Smithsonian. And so that'll at least give us a preview of the kinds of stories, the kinds of things we want to talk about in really saying, how have Latinos helped shape this country? What has been their experience in this country? All these stories that are so critical to tell.
The collaboration between NASA and the Smithsonian is quite deep. Can you talk a little bit about that history?
Yeah, it dates amazingly all the way back to the 1960s. In fact, I think the first agreement was signed back in 1967, where NASA said that all of the significant artifacts from air and space would be, as soon as they were done using them, for technical purposes, they would go to the Smithsonian to be kept in perpetuity. And this is so incredibly important because obviously this is such a story of innovation, of amazing feats done by teams, done by individuals, that the fact that NASA really made this agreement very early on with the Smithsonian means we have all these artifacts to help us tell the story. And of course, it started, and the dominant part of the National Air and Space Museum's collection is the Apollo collection. So all of the Apollo artifacts, down to really old containers of pineapple that the astronauts took to the moon, everything went to the Air and Space Museum. So when you see artifacts around the world from Apollo, they're on loan from the Smithsonian, because obviously we wanted to get that story out, not just across the country, but around the world. We also hold one of my favorite things at the Air and Space Museum, which is the Apollo art collection. During Apollo, NASA commissioned all the leading artists of the day to be documenting Apollo from an artistic point of view. And I really love that because I love this intersection between science, technology, engineering, math, and the arts. And those two are really critically important. So we have a Rauschenberg, we have like 5 Norman Rockwells, we have an Alma Thomas, that's my absolute favorite. So the fact that the Smithsonian can help tell that Apollo story is because we have these artifacts. And now this relationship continues to today. But NASA now gives the Smithsonian sort of first right of refusal of the artifacts, and then does give them to other museums around the country. It's not as exclusive as it used to be, but that's okay, because seriously, we actually run out of room to store things at the Smithsonian.
I've had the opportunity to interview many NASA scientists over the years on my journalistic programs, and it's always been fascinating. But what becomes very clear very quickly is that NASA has this massive portfolio, right? From the home planet to biodiversity to human impact to international space and moonlight, right? I mean, the list kind of goes on and on and on. How do you think you're going to be able to capture all of that and then represent some of that in the National Museum of the American Latino? What's that intersection look like?
Well, when you think about a museum, really what you're doing is telling stories. Again, stories of individuals who made a difference, stories of teams that made a difference. And obviously that story of NASA, if you're going to do a story about Perseverance rover, of course, that's on Mars right now, you want to talk about Diana Trujillo, who is a Latino woman who's doing amazing things as part of the engineering team on Perseverance. And so to me, it always comes back to the story. What's the story? Because you might have an artifact, but you really want to know, who is the person that built that? Who's the person that operated it? What struggles did they go through personally to achieve these amazing things? And the story of this country is the story of American Latinos. They've, as everyone knows, contributed huge amounts, been there every step of the way. It took 400,000 people to accomplish Apollo. And so the job of the new museum is going to be to collect all those inspiring stories, some of them not wonderful stories, a lot of them stories of hardship, stories of struggle, stories of prejudice, and other stories are stories of perseverance and triumph and huge contributions to the history of this country. And so for the new director and the curators of that museum, frankly, it's going to be an embarrassment of riches, because there are so many stories out there, and which story do you choose, and which artifacts do you choose, and what is the narrative of the museum going to be? And that's going to be what we're going to be working on as we go through the longer process of actually getting the museum built, is what are the stories? And, so many of those stories at NASA, whether it's Ellen Ochoa, who flew obviously on the space shuttle and then went on to become head of Johnson Space Center, or whether it's somebody we're going to be talking to later here today, Marla from the NASA Glenn Research Center. The Latino story is the NASA story, and that we want that museum to definitely tell that.
An embarrassment of riches is always a very good problem for someone who's curating a museum to have. Dr. Stofan, I'm going to have you stand by for a moment. We're going to continue our conversation in just a few moments. I wanted to hear about the great work that is going on, in fact, at NASA's Glenn Research Center and Langley Research Center, leaders, of course, in aeronautics and aviation. So let's welcome the Glenn Research Center Director, Dr. Marla Pérez-Davis.
Over our 80 years of operations, NASA Glenn has made many contributions to space and aeronautics, from ground testing, materials development, and research perspective. In that time, we have helped NASA explore the solar system. We have made aircraft cleaner, quieter, and safer, and our technologies have changed lives here on Earth. Initially established in 1941 as an aircraft engine research laboratory, NASA Glenn now contributes to a variety of NASA and commercial aerospace missions through our expertise in aircraft and space technology. Glenn is helping the United States send the first woman and the first person of color to the moon. Our world-class test facilities and unrivaled expertise in power, propulsion, and advanced materials are crucial to advancing Artemis. Glenn is conducting revolutionary aeronautics research in green technologies like electric aircraft propulsion and advanced materials and alternative fuels for sustainable aviation, while also exploring next-generation supersonic and hypersonic aircraft. Our Neil A. Armstrong Test Facility in Sandusky is home to the world's largest and most powerful space environment simulation chambers, and it has been instrumental in preparing the Orion spacecraft for the Artemis 1 mission later this year. NASA Glenn is advancing human spaceflight through our leading roles in power and propulsion communication technologies, advanced materials, and through our world-class test facilities. Our center played a critical role in the development and testing of the Orion spacecraft for Artemis 1. And we will look on with pride at its flight around the moon and back to prove the systems and technologies needed to safely launch astronauts on Artemis 2 in the coming years. We are finalizing the design of the power and propulsion element for our lunar gateway. Once integrated and launched with the habitation and logistic output, it will form the cornerstone of our exploration architecture around the moon. And its innovative high-power propulsion system will provide more access to lunar surface while demonstrating those technologies for future human exploration of Mars. NASA Glenn will continue to meet future surface exploration needs by advancing a broad portfolio of cutting-edge power generation and distribution systems, including radioisotope, fission, and solar, that will work together to ensure future missions have the plentiful, reliable power required to be successful. NASA's vision of flight looks very different from today's world, and we believe we are at the right place at the right time, and we foresee a future commercial aviation renaissance unlike any other. We see electrified propulsion as one of the key drivers of changing the way we travel, making future aircraft cleaner, more efficient, and more cost-effective. We are tackling the challenges of electric propulsion for small to large aircraft. Our focus is on the development of all electric propulsion systems and components, from batteries to megawatt scale systems. And we are partnering with industry on future large-scale hybrid electric concept to meet NASA's requirements on carbon, fuel burn, emissions, and noise. We are rallying emerging markets to tackle the challenges of creating an air transportation system for urban and underserved areas that is all electric, autonomous, efficient, and safe for moving passengers and packages. At Glenn, we are studying how electric systems can be optimized, and we are supporting engine and power technology development. We're also working to understand and mitigate the vehicle's acoustics to help limit noise issues. And we are developing secure data links and real-time communications to safely integrate these aircraft in the national airspace. We are building an experimental airplane called the X-59. It flies at supersonic speeds, but makes a quiet thump instead of a loud sonic boom. We will fly it to provide data to enable regulation changes to allow overland commercial supersonic flight. This project is the game changer for future transcontinental and intercontinental transportation concepts, and will provide an opportunity to generate economic and societal benefit in a globally linked world.
To talk a little bit more about the exciting work the Hispanic workforce is supporting at Langley Research Center is Engineering Project Manager Debbie Martinez.
Thanks, Soledad. The Convergent Aeronautics Solution, or CAS project, is helping NASA change the way airplanes fly and the aviation industry along with it. By providing innovative solutions to complex problems, CAS seeks to help all of NASA aeronautic research and the broader community to the benefit of the U.S. economy and our quality of life. As the CAS Execution Manager, I have worked with numerous talented and creative researchers, such as those on the STEREO team. STEREO stands for Scalable Traffic Management for Emergency Response Operations. We are here at Langley Certain Range. The STEREO team had flight tests here. They partnered with the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection and the U.S. Forest Service, who flew aircrafts that help fight wildfires in coordination with our NASA drones, using the STEREO system to keep all parties informed. The increased communication and coordination from the ground units to the vehicles in the air helped make the battle against wildfires faster, safer, and more targeted. Let's take a look at other aeronautic programs that some of my Hispanic colleagues are supporting.
I work for the Advanced Air Transport Technology Project, and we're focused on exploring and developing technologies to improve energy efficiency and environmental compatibility for fixed-wing subsonic transport. What is that? Those are passengers and cargo aircrafts. These studies look at vehicle configurations that are 3 generations beyond what we currently are using. For that, we need to have mature technology solutions ready for the time frame of 2035 to 2045. Recently, at 14x22, we tested the Common Research Model on the simplified high-lift configuration with active flow control. And active flow control is one of the technologies that we're trying to develop, where it manipulates the flow around a wing to make it more efficient. All these studies are super exciting because it will impact positively the way we travel in the future.
The facility you have behind me is the Cockpit Motion Facility, which is our premier world-class facility that consists of 3 high-fidelity, full-mission, human-in-the-loop flight simulators and 1 6 degree of freedom motion platform. My job here consists of leading a team of engineers and technicians on the planning and execution of operations, maintenance, and improvements of the flight simulators and the motion platform. Flight simulation is a safe and cost-effective way to train pilots and design aircrafts. It also allows us to develop new technologies to improve the decision-making of the pilot and also response to emergency situation in the cab. Flight simulation is definitely an important factor in keeping the commercial aviation safe for the flying public.
The Electrified Powertrain Flight Demonstration Project is part of NASA Aeronautics' focus to expand research on sustainable aviation through the development and test of green technologies for the next generation of aircraft. NASA and industry have conducted studies on electrified aircraft propulsion concepts, and the results indicate that there is significant reduction in energy use, emissions, which reduces our carbon footprint, as well as a reduction in direct operating costs, which will benefit both the public and airline operators. Through industry cost-sharing partnerships, the Electrified Powertrain Flight Demonstration Project is working to mature and flight test megawatt-class electrified powertrain systems, which are at the heart of electrified aircraft propulsion systems. This is a game changer. If we can actually introduce megawatt-class powertrain systems, we can change how aviation aircraft are designed in the future, with applications to turboprops, regional, as well as single-aisle aircraft.
New airspace operations are rapidly emerging involving multi-rotor vehicles. Small quadcopters and octocopters are being proposed for applications such as surveillance, photography, or even package delivery. The System-Wide Safety Project is developing tools that are critical to the safe integration of these vehicles into the national airspace system, which is particularly important for urban environments with a high population density. So the work that I'm involved with is developing flight dynamic simulations that can accurately predict the vehicle's trajectory, the vehicle's performance, and simulate different air traffic management scenarios. And so we complete different wind tunnel tests to assess the vehicle's aerodynamic behavior in a wide range of operating conditions. This ranges from hover all the way to forward flight. It's definitely an exciting time to be a part of NASA and shape the future of aviation.
Thanks for joining us at NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia. Back to you, Soledad.
NASA is doing an incredible amount of work in Earth science, specifically with efforts to understand our Earth's atmosphere, crust, water, and life as a single connected system, and understanding the Earth system and its response to natural and human impact give us a better understanding of our continuously changing climate. These studies and insights are necessary to determine how to predict future changes of climate, weather, and natural hazards. So here to give us additional insight into these efforts is Earth Science Deputy Director, Ms. Sandra Kaufman.
Thank you so much, Soledad, for that introduction. NASA Earth Science conducts a very comprehensive program of breakthrough science research on climate science. We use our 23 space missions that we have in collecting all kinds of data. We have another 16 missions that we have under development that are going to be launched in the next several years. We also use the International Space Station. So with all of these missions and instruments aboard the space station, we measure aerosols in our atmosphere. We try to understand whether they come from natural sources or man-made sources. We also study the processes that regulate the abundance of ozone in the atmosphere. There is such thing as the ozone hole, and we measure it, and we can predict certain aspects of it. We study sea level rise. We only have one Earth, and we are helping to the best that we can in understanding it and measure what's happening. Earth Science has a very strong applied sciences program, and in that program, we not only do disaster response due to natural hazards, we also have a program on public health, helping predict illnesses such as, malaria, chikungunya, in a lot of the countries in South America, Latin America, and Africa. That is a big problem. And we are trying to use our satellites, the measurements of temperature, the measurements of moisture, and try to predict the incidence of some of these illnesses. We also have a very strong agricultural program that is helping farmers out there in not just on scientific studies, but trying to understand, for example, soil loss, soil moisture, plant evapotranspiration, whether the soil is not in good condition, whether the soil is releasing carbon into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. And so all these aspects are the aspects that we work and help and study. And of course, working with local communities, working with people in coastal areas with the sea level rise, and helping anticipate aspects of resilience, community resilience, and such. So last, I wanted to talk about our Surveyor program, an initiative that we have with the United States Agency for International Development, USAID. And we work in partnership with leading regional organizations worldwide to help developing countries use this information provided by our satellites. And empowering local communities all the way from West Africa, South Africa, the Himalaya region, Central America. And we are planning on opening up a new hub in Central America in the upcoming years. So all in all, earth science is trying to contribute to the understanding of our planet, but also help with all kinds of aspects that benefits society in general. So thank you very much, and back to you, Soledad.
We just learned about the work being done here on Earth, so now let's take a look above. Another interesting and exciting research area that NASA works on is space food. Food is critical, of course, for mission success and the health and performance of the astronauts. Maintaining a healthy diet plays an important role, specifically socially and psychologically, which is important for long-duration missions in space. So how does NASA handle feeding its diverse crew members? Let's turn it over to Johnson Space Center.
Thanks, Soledad. My name is Gisela Munoz, and I'm a crew systems instructor in the Flight Operations Directorate. One of the lessons astronauts receive from our team is food preparation and equipment, which covers not only how to operate the galley hardware, but also what types of food they can expect to see when they're on orbit and how to prepare them. Space food is prepared and packaged differently than on Earth. A standard menu for astronauts will include rehydratable foods and beverages, thermostabilized foods that are packaged similar to military MREs, and natural form foods like nuts or cookies. If you're lucky, you'll get food from one of our international partners like Russian, European, Canadian, or Japanese space agencies. Astronauts also have access to fresh food like apples and oranges that are flown up on our commercial resupply vehicles. Eating and drinking in space is different than on Earth because of the lack of gravity. Since you're not able to pour drinks into a cup, beverages are packaged in a pouch and sucked out through a straw. For your food, you need to be careful as you eat because even small pieces of food don't normally fall off the table like they do on Earth, but they'll float away and hopefully not at one of your fellow crewmates. One popular Hispanic food used in space are tortillas. Tortillas are a staple food and native to Hispanic cuisine in Mexico, Central, and South America. Tortillas have been used on orbit for decades for crew meals as early as the beginning of the Space Shuttle program. Astronauts have gotten creative over the years with using tortillas to make pizzas, fajitas, breakfast burritos, and even a space cheeseburger. Tortillas are a great component to the standard menu because they don't create a lot of crumbs and have a longer shelf life than the standard breads we eat on the ground. Shelf life is important because astronaut meals are sent up to the International Space Station in advance. In addition to the standard menu, astronauts are provided a small sample of off-the-shelf foods they request to fly. Some recent requests have included Hispanic foods such as salsa sacera, bean dip with jalapenos, and tostada shells. Salsa sacera is a red sauce dip made from chili peppers, red peppers, onion, garlic, and tomatoes. Tostada shells are similar to tortillas, but have a crunchy consistency. Avocados even made a recent trip up the ISS aboard one of the resupply vehicles. It is important to incorporate this variety into everyday meals and take crew preferences into consideration. The acceptability of astronaut meals are a contributor to the positive psychological health and performance of the crew while they are in space. Gathering for meals with friends and family with good food is an important part of the Hispanic culture. Entire songs have been dedicated to the menu of Hispanic cuisine, such as El Menú. The opportunity to have the comforts of home cannot be understated. This will be equally important as we venture farther from home during the Artemis missions.
And it's back to our conversation with Dr. Stofan. So given this long-standing partnership between NASA and the Smithsonian, how do you see them working together on the Latino Museum? What would that actually sort of look like in practice?
Well, one of the things that NASA is constantly think about is how do we help inspire that next generation? And that's actually also the mission at the Air and Space Museum. And I know it's the mission for the whole Smithsonian is really thinking about how do we inspire the next generation to do more, to discover more, to invent more, to keep this great story of this country going. And so when I think of the Latino Museum and NASA working together, one of the things I really think about is first of all, going back to Marian Wright Edelman's quote, "You can't be what you can't see." And so are we highlighting people like the astronaut Franklin Chang Diaz or Joe Acaba, who you're going to talk to, or Ellen Ochoa? Are we really telling those stories of people like Diana, of people like Marla, these amazing engineers, so that every kid who walks into that museum understands that people who look like them have been making incredible contributions all along? And I know that's really important to NASA, and I know it's really important to the Smithsonian, that piece about inspiration. And then, of course, it's always the programs. It's not just the artifacts, which are critically important, that help us tell the stories. It's not just who we're featuring, but what kind of programming, what kind of educational reach, so that certainly people who come to the museum are being inspired, but we're also creating digital outreach, using all those incredible skills that NASA has and the Smithsonian has together to really make sure we're not just reaching kids who can come to Washington, but that we're reaching kids all around this country and all around the world.
Currently, NASA is preparing for return to the moon, and there are a handful of Hispanic astronauts who are working to make that a reality. This means that they could be the very first Hispanic astronauts to ever set foot on the moon, which is amazing.
It really is amazing. And I'm old enough that I remember the first moon landing. And while it was certainly inspiring, and actually my dad worked at NASA at that time, it didn't make me think I'm going to go do that, because frankly, none of them looked like me. And this idea that those first crews that we send to the moon, the multiple crews we'll send there, and then the first humans that walk on Mars, they're going to look like all of us. And to me, again, it gets back to that inspiration. If we can do this together, just think what kind of power we have. And to me, that is part of the inspiration of space exploration that I think has helped certainly bring this country together during Apollo. But I think, now as we really struggle with COVID, I think we need a little of that moonshot feeling of, if we put our minds to it, we can do anything. We can have humans walk on the moon.
I love the concept of storytelling as a way of both bringing people together, but also really making people recognize themselves. I mean, in this idea of including everybody's story in that bigger storytelling picture. Dr. Stofan, we're going to take a break in order to hear from the astronauts, Dr. Frank Rubio and Joe Acaba, who are going to tell us a little bit about what this means for them.
All right, Frank. So, here we are in Hispanic Heritage Month, and I think it's really important because it gives us that time to really reflect upon the contributions that the Hispanic community has contributed, not only to the space program, but to the U.S. As a whole. So it really just gives us an opportunity to reflect on all the work that we've done, the contributions that we have given, and really to celebrate that, and for us to remember our heritage and to take part and really focus our time on that.
Yeah, Joe, I agree. I think it's a really important thing that we celebrate, right? We as Americans, I think one of the great things for our nation is that we are made up of so many backgrounds and cultures. And I think acknowledging that, acknowledging where we came from, for my kids, I want them to be really proud to be Latinos or Hispanic-Americans. And despite the fact that, they're American to the core, I don't want them to forget where they came from, where we came from. And so as a nation, I think throughout the year, the fact that we're able to celebrate different cultural backgrounds and diversity is just great, because I think more than anything, it acknowledges that as a country, we're made up of a whole lot of different backgrounds that came together and made this awesome thing named America. And I think together, those cultures and those backgrounds can accomplish and continue to accomplish amazing things.
So I think when we talk about, having whatever culture it may be, working at NASA, it's super important. I think everybody understands today that a diverse team makes for a better team. You get different perspectives, different ways of doing things. So that's super important. And being an astronaut, it is a visible occupation. Frank and I, we're just a couple of ordinary dudes from California, but we have a really cool job, and it's an important job, and it's very visible. And so, part of what we do is representing NASA, but then also representing who we are as people. And so I think from the NASA side, that's super important. But when we go out and, either when we give talks or when we go and do our missions, people are watching. When I was first selected as an astronaut, the Puerto Rican community, they just embraced me. They were proud. They reached out to me. And then as I flew on my shuttle flight and then future flights, that support just continued. And as I give talks and I talk to kids, they look at that and they go, dang, if Joe can do that, I can do that. And that's not belittling to me. It's just, I'm a regular person that, had a dream, and it happened to work out. So I think it's important for NASA, and I think it's important for the Latino community to see me and Frank and others that are doing this work, representing them and, trying to make them proud.
Yeah, Joe, that's an awesome way to put it. Like you said, we're just blessed to have this awesome job and to represent the NASA team, right? We represent thousands of people that just put in so much work and effort to make what we do happen. And I think people forget. Yeah, you look at my class, for instance, and we're an incredibly diverse class. But first and foremost, within our core, competence and capability are utmost, because ultimately we're trusting each other with our lives. And so when I look at Joe, it's awesome that he's Hispanic, right? And that I know that he's reaching a large portion of our society. But really, when I see Joe, I see an incredibly capable, competent astronaut, and that's who I want beside me. Not just because he's Latino, but also because, and really mostly because of who he is as an astronaut, as far as being capable, knowledgeable, and competent in what he does. And I think all of us take a lot of pride in that. When I think about the moon and going back to the moon, I honestly go back to being a kid mode, right? I personally don't care who it is. It's going to be hopefully one of my peers that's in the Corps now. And just thinking of my friends being up there, it just makes me excited. And not just because I'm an astronaut, but as a person, as an American, as a human being. I just think accomplishing great things brings us together because we're all excited about being able to point and say, wow, look what we're capable of doing when we put our efforts together and work hard and overcome obstacles and take challenges head on. So yeah, excitement, happiness, joy. I mean, it's hard not to smile when I think of going back there. You know, I look forward to hopefully contributing as a NASA team to accomplishing something that, you know, I think we can imagine it right now, but we can't even dream of how awesome having a community on the moon in a permanent or semi-permanent state is going to be like. It's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be hard, but I think it's going to make it even better. The fact that it is hard is going to make it even better for us to be able to accomplish those things.
Yeah, when I think about all of us going back to the moon, and if I just had to say a few words, it would be, you know what? If we can do it, you can do it. And you know, that sounds very simple, but it takes a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work for us to go back to the moon, and I think it signifies that amount of work, that amount of dedication. So whatever the younger generation wants to do, just know that if we can do this, if we can get back to the moon, you can accomplish what you want to do. We're not working every day thinking about a legacy, but it is important for us to realize that people do look up to us as a role model. And, you know, I feel proud that, you know, we both are leaving a mark, to our country, to where we came from, and just the world in general. So I think, you know, the most important thing is being a good person, and working really hard. You know, you're not always going to be the best at any particular job, but you can work hard. You can make yourself proud. You can make your family proud. And I think that, you know, when I start thinking about a legacy, I'm hoping that's what people will remember is, you know, Joe was just this regular old dude, but, you know, he worked hard. He was a good person, and, and I can be proud about that.
Right. We, as a Latino community, tend to bring a lot of joy and celebration to the picture. And I think nowadays, especially, our nation needs a little bit of joy. And so as we reflect and as we celebrate, trying to stay focused on, yes, we're in a hard period in our history right now, but we're going to overcome this. And we're going to look back and say, hey, we did it. We got past that. And now it's time to keep moving forward. And so let's celebrate, enjoy, take pride in who we are, and then keep moving forward. Adelante.
Back with Dr. Stofan. Washington, D.C. has a lot of museums, Why this one? What will make it different? Why would you say people have absolutely, positively have to go to this museum when it's finally built and completed?
You know, when I think of all the Smithsonians, and for example, you could argue we already have a Museum of American History. Why do we need a museum just about the Latino population? But when I look at our Museum of Native American Museum, when I look at the African American History and Culture Museum, those museums show the richness and the depth of the stories and the contributions that have made this country what it is. And I think to be able to highlight stories that, frankly, people just don't know. I mean, how many people know who Felix Carrera was? I mean, he was a Puerto Rican World War I fighter pilot hero. Every kid should know his name. And this museum will give us the opportunity to tell more stories, to talk about the contributions that Latinos have made to this country, but also to show the darker side. What have been the struggles? What have been the challenges? And I think that for those of us who really think about the rich, rich heritage that goes back hundreds of years in this country, those stories need to be told. They need to be more commonly understood. And it is the American story, and it's the Smithsonian's job to tell the American story. And the Latino Museum will give us more space, more room, more bandwidth to make sure that everybody's story gets told.
Many museums focus a lot on history, sort of ancient artifacts. It sounds like you're going to have to figure out how to toggle between the history, the historic story, but also the unfolding present as well.
You know, our Secretary Lonnie Bunch of the Smithsonian likes to talk about the fact that the role of the Smithsonian, and really the role of museums, is to help people understand the present in the context of the past and to help us chart a better future. And so when you think about that, we should be using history in all these museums to help us understand how we got to the place we are today, because hopefully that'll help us understand what's happening. It gives you a very different interpretation of what's happening right now if you really understand the path we walked to get here. And then when you think of that path, it helps you understand, how do we get to the future that we all have a role in creating? And I think sometimes a lot of us feel like the future is something that happens to us. It's not something that we have agency in. And to me, at the Smithsonian, we're telling the stories of the past. We're involving people in the excitement of what's happening now. But it's all with the idea of how can the public then use that information to help create the future that we all want.
NASA is obviously continuing its work on inspirational missions that capture the imagination of many. I know that currently the agency is exploring foreign worlds, looking to get humans back to the moon, as I mentioned, all while expanding our understanding of the planet. Through its work, the agency hopes to continue to inspire young people. You've mentioned that several times. I know that's a real piece of the mission, or the missions, is to make sure that young people are constantly inspired and of course spark an interest in science and research and exploration. So I thought it would be a good time to hear from the workforce at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida and Jet Propulsion Lab in California on some of the work that inspiring Hispanics are doing.
Happy Hispanic Heritage Month from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. I'm Liliana Villarreal, Operations Flow Manager with the Exploration Ground Systems Program. I'm supporting our return to the moon through NASA's Artemis missions. I'm responsible for the overall management, planning, integration, and execution of operational ground and flight hardware activities required to support Orion and Space Launch System human spaceflight missions. My responsibility is to help lead the team to ensure we successfully complete the ground processing tests and assembly in preparation for the Artemis 1 launch. I was born in Cartagena, Colombia, but consider Miami, Florida my hometown. I moved to Florida with my family when I was 10 years old. The fact that this is the foundation for going back to the moon and eventually going deeper into space is such an inspiration for me. To be part of the team that started that is a dream for an aerospace engineer like me. We are very fortunate in NASA to have a healthy and strong Hispanic workforce. Most of them are very much involved in mentoring and sharing their knowledge with the younger workforce, but a lot of us also do outreach with the public and most importantly to the K to 12th grade students. I think it's important to ensure people see that we do have Hispanics and other minorities working these amazing, complex, and exciting programs, because we need to show everyone that a diverse team is a successful team. I am Artemis. We are Artemis. As we prepare to launch missions to the moon from Florida, get to know one of the team members behind the Mars 2020 mission from the NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California.
Happy Hispanic Heritage Month from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory here in sunny California. My name is Elio Morillo, and I'm a test and operations engineer for Mars 2020. I've worked on the Perseverance rover, as well as the Ingenuity helicopter. Currently, I'm the engineering operations mechanisms lead. So my team and I make sure that the rover is healthy on the surface of Mars every single day, that it's roving, as well as collecting samples. These samples are going to be one day returned by our follow-on mission, the Mars Sample Return Mission, which is going to be in charge of taking these samples from Mars and bringing them back to Earth, something we've never done in history and we're very excited about. One of the reasons I came to JPL is because we live at the cutting edge of space exploration. And along with that, we have a very diverse workforce. I was born in Ecuador, grew up in Puerto Rico, lived in New York City for several years, went to school in Michigan, and came here to California. Here at JPL, I found an incredible supportive community of engineers and scientists, particularly through the employee resource group Amigos Unidos, where I've found my family away from home, my familia. Through Amigos Unidos, we've created a supportive network that serves as a community both on campus and outside. I've been able to find mentors that have taught me leadership as well as technical proficiency. And through several outreach events, such as the open house, high school initiatives, the summer internship program, we continue to inspire the future generation of engineers and scientists to continue this legacy of space exploration. The great thing about NASA is that alongside the engineers and scientists, we have social media specialists, graphic designers, storytellers, business administrators, all different kinds of skills and levels of expertise that help us push all the many missions of NASA forward. It really does take a village. And now, let's hear from our friends and California neighbors at NASA Ames Research Center.
Hi, my name is Cesar Acosta. I've been working here at NASA Ames Research Center for the past 27 years. 20 of those being right here at the ArcJet facility. Here at the ArcJets, what we do is we do heat shield testing. We test material for entry into an atmosphere, making sure that that material that goes on board a spacecraft is safe. The Hispanic team members that we have here at the ArcJet facility consist of test engineers, technicians, electricians, and data acquisition. I've seen that grow in the past 20 years. It makes me proud to see a bigger Hispanic community here. And as a Hispanic, it gives me great pride to be working here at the ArcJets and just being part of this team.
Dr. Stofan, it all sounds very, very exciting. How do you advise people to keep up with all that's unfolding as we're on this path to creating the museum?
Well, a couple different ways. First of all is, of course, come to our website, si.edu, which will let you know what's happening with the museum. So when we appoint new board members, that some of whom are pretty famous people that you've heard of, like Eva Longoria or Jose Andres. So I urge people to keep up with who's being appointed to the board. I would also say that you'll be able to see the progress on when we appoint the director later this year, as we go through that site selection process. And of course, as we think about how do we get everybody in the country involved in terms of thinking about the stories this museum is going to tell and the role that it's going to play. So I urge everyone to keep an eye on this, come to our website. And of course, again, one more time, in May of 2022, please come to the Museum of American History on the Mall and come visit the Molina Family Gallery. Soledad, of course, you're on the board also of the new Latino Museum. How do you feel about being part of this great adventure?
Sort of like, it seems kind of overwhelming, and talking to you about it makes it seem even more overwhelming. I'm incredibly honored, obviously, and very excited, but already you think like, well, what is the story of the American Latino? Is it my mom's story, came to this country as an Afro-Latina from Cuba? Is it the story of Americans who are Mexican descent, whose families have been here for generations and generations and generations? There are so many interesting stories to tell that as a journalist, we never even scrape the surface of. So I'm just absolutely thrilled. I'm very, very honored. Thank you for asking me that.
Thank you.
A big thank you to Dr. Ellen Stofan for a great conversation. And I have to say, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to in this new museum is to see so many Americans exposed to the story of our community. We've had an incredible impact on this country, and our ancestors, whether they were our parents or our great-great-grandparents, have been refreshing our country's culture for 500 plus years. Our stories are America's stories. This museum and conversations like the one we just had underscore just how much we have infused American culture with the very best of us. And I think it's also an opportunity to correct some of the mistakes made long before my mom arrived in this country from Cuba. And for many years, a lack of recognition, a lack of inclusion. Our community has been a great part of the American story and society and culture, the arts, schools, government, corporate America. Only 2%, or 10 Fortune 500 CEOs are of Hispanic descent. Only 3% of full-time college professors are Hispanic. Latinos account for just 6% of judges on courts of appeals, 7% of judges on district courts, though everybody's very proud to have Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. There are just 26 Hispanic members of Congress, but passing this legislation to create the National Museum of the American Latino is just the beginning. Now the real work begins. I'm happy to see some of you in this room leading the change. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And a very special thank you to the Hispanic Outreach and Leadership Alliance, HOLA, at NASA headquarters for this opportunity, and to everyone across NASA who participated in today's program. Thank you all for watching. And now let's hear a few words from HOLA's leadership.
Gracias, Soledad. What a joy and honor to have you as our host for today's program. On behalf of the Hispanic Outreach and Leadership Alliance here at NASA headquarters from beautiful Washington, D.C., we'd like to thank you and Dr. Ellen Stofan for leading such a great conversation about the creation of the Museum of the American Latino. Latino Americans have touched many aspects of our daily lives, and we're excited to hear the stories that will be told through it.
Here at OLA, we work hard to foster awareness and promote the contributions that our community has done here at NASA. So we're looking forward to increase that representation, involvement in our science, technology, engineering, and space exploration.
We would like to thank the NASA employee resource groups across the agency who participated in this year's program: Ames Research Center, Glenn Research Center, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Johnson Space Center, Kennedy Space Center, and Langley Research Center. Thank you also to NASA leadership for supporting employee resource groups like OLA and for embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now, let's hear from our NASA Administrator, Senator Bill Nelson.
This program marked an opportunity to celebrate and reflect on the contributions and impact of Hispanics throughout our community, our country, beyond. Thank you to Soledad O'Brien, Ellen Stofan, and all our NASA guests for contributing to this meaningful conversation. And as we heard in the program, Congress passed legislation to build a national museum of the American Latino in December 2020. What a historic moment. I look forward to seeing the development of this future museum and ensuring the full NASA story and the Latino story, that it's captured and shared with the world. As NASA continues studying our home planet, exploring our solar system, and way beyond, and preparing to go back to the moon and then on to Mars, it will take all of us working together to be successful. NASA is committed to a culture of diversity, equality, and unity. Thank you again for joining us in celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And a special thank you to the Hispanic Outreach and Leadership Alliance at NASA headquarters, and to the Hispanic employee resource groups all across NASA centers. Onward and upward.